Welcome to the News Roundup for Monday, December 22nd, 2025. I'm Bill Thomas. Christmas 2025 is just hours away, and here's what's happening right now. The congressional probe into Minnesota's staggering fraud scandal expanding rapidly, with a top House committee now inviting state lawmakers to testify in Washington. A top cabinet member accusing Ilhan Omar of gaslighting the American people as a special IRS crime division tracks stolen fraud money to Somalia. And incoming New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani reveals the socialist politician who will be swearing him into office. That'll be during a massive public ceremony on New Year's Day. Also, President Trump upping the ante and making a bold move aimed at adding the world's largest island to the U.S. And a legendary performer postponing his upcoming shows, and this following a shocking diagnosis that he's now suffering from lung cancer. All this and a bunch more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin in Washington, where federal lawmakers are now circling the wagons and preparing to dig much deeper into Governor Tim Walz and his handling of Minnesota's widespread welfare fraud. On Capitol Hill, the House Oversight Committee has just dispatched urgent letters to a number of high-ranking Minnesota state officials, informing them that Congress, they're seriously looking into the matter and inviting them to testify during a series of upcoming in-person interviews. Furthermore, those letters go on to warn the Walz administration officials that if they choose not to honor the request, the committee may be forced to take much stronger measures to find out what they know. And I think they know more than they're letting on. The committee chairman says they're taking such extreme action because a number of whistleblowers have made it crystal clear that American taxpayers have been seriously defrauded by what's going on in Minnesota. And basically, they've had enough. Also claims there are now legitimate questions as to whether or not Governor Tim Walz and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison knowingly failed to act and were therefore actually complicit in those crimes. Among the state officials invited to attend the hearings on Capitol Hill, executives involved with Minnesota's food and nutrition programs, homeless initiatives, and leaders in their departments of education as well as human services. For his part, Governor Walz still fumbling and bumbling his way through the entire mess and trying to cover his tracks as best he can. While admittedly taking full accountability for what's going on, Walz says now that his opponents are completely exaggerating the amount of fraud damage without having any proof whatsoever to back up their claims. He goes on to argue that the Trump administration is simply making up outlandish numbers, weaponizing them for political reasons, and sensationalizing those figures as an excuse to eliminate government welfare programs for people who need the most. In the meantime, a number of state officials are standing firmly behind Walz. They say current evidence shows the recent Minnesota benefit fraud to be in the tens of millions of dollars to date and nowhere near the $9 billion as claimed by U.S. attorneys. And they also claim that if there's proof to the contrary, those federal attorneys have an obligation to show Minnesota the evidence so they can finally do something about it. And final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. This is the time of year when each and every one of us looks forward to and, in my mind, is deserving of a stellar Christmas present. And this year's carefully chosen, delicately wrapped, no batteries required gift comes to us from the courtesy of this one, Walsney Claus. Now, to save you the trouble, your News Roundup team has spent the last several days unwrapping the Minnesota-manufactured stocking stuffer and the total retail value of this holiday deal. Yeah, they say somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 billion clams. Yeah, it's one of those gifts you can't buy at Macy's or Nordstrom, or, now that I think about it, pretty much anywhere else. Important to point out, this is the gift that keeps on giving, and one which taxpayers like you and I have been charged with footing the bill for. Most of us, however, never signed off on such an extravagant gift. We were kind of conned into it, and now it's the feds to the rescue to get to the bottom of what once sounded like the perfect crime. By the way, Tim Walz, trusting you to fix a disaster which happened on your watch, that would be like the former bosses at Enron saying, trust us to head up a new Fortune 500 company. Now, it's not funny, Governor Timbo. Do the right thing for your state and simply step aside or face impeachment. Now, producer Davey, don't forget that for Christmas coming up, I do want that pinball machine which you and I talked about, and maybe a pony as well. And what do you make of this guy saying that he actually wants a third term as the governor of Minnesota?
Well, we talked about it a lot, Bill. The good people in Minnesota get to decide for themselves what they think is best, what they think is political spin, and whether or not he deserves a third term. But I can't say it's looking very good for him right now.
No, it's not, especially with Mike Lindell, the fine Republican, stepping up. I think he's going to win this handily coming up next election. This guy, Tim Walz, he failed as a leader in a spectacular fashion, and he says he wants to hang out in the governor's mansion for another 4-year term. I think that's just utter delusion. All right, stay on topic a bit longer now and turn our attention to another branch of the federal government, which is looking closely at Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and her possible link to Somali involvement in Minnesota's massive fraud crimes. And right now, both the Treasury Department and a special investigations unit from the IRS actively following the money trail in those schemes and tracking down a number of large overseas cash transfers involving those diverted funds. Yeah, I'm like you. Tell me more. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the IRS crime unit has already discovered a bunch of unregulated wire transfer networks leading directly to the Middle East, Somalia as well. He also says they're working diligently to find out exactly how that money has since been used and by whom. Additionally, the Treasury Secretary now accuses Representative Omar of intentionally misleading the public by trying to downplay her role in the entire affair. He says the Congresswoman's ongoing efforts to deflect attention away from her connection to the Somali community members allegedly involved in the massive fraud schemes, really nothing more than an attempt to gaslight the American people and convince them that nothing unseemly went wrong. I think we all kind of know a little bit better. For her part, Omar says the secretary has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. While she admits to previously accepting campaign donations from people allegedly involved in the scams, she now says she sent all that money back, and that happened years ago, according to her. Additionally, Omar also claims she was one of the first members of Congress to call for an investigation into the alleged fraud taking place in her state's pandemic-era food assistance program. Furthermore, she is now urging people not to scapegoat the entire Somali community for the actions of a few wayward members, saying that most of those people are merely grateful, law-abiding U.S. citizens who have chosen to make Minnesota their home. Now, final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Here's the way I see it. If Minnesota were a movie, it would be Dumb and Dumber with Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar taking the starring roles away from Jim Carrey and whoever that other guy was. If Madam Omar thinks she can outsmart our nation's Treasury Secretary, his entire department, the IRS, and others, then she's even more confused than the governor. The guy we were just talking about, Tim I Know Nothing Walz. This fraud seems to have taken on a life of its own, and to make things even more disgusting, Bessent is indicating that taxpayer dollars may have been funneled overseas to Somalia and elsewhere. That's your money. It's my money as well. So, tons of folks have left comments for us right here, making it abundantly clear that Omar should simply vacate her seat. And we agree. Step aside. Move forward with a special election, and all Minnesotans should demand better leadership. Unfortunately, she'll never give up that high-paying government job, but in less than about a year, Omar is up for re-election for her U.S. House seat for Minnesota's 5th District, and I say a vote for her is a vote for additional fraud, corruption, and poor representation. Do not get shortchanged. And Producer Davey, to my recollection, in previous semesters, members of the House and Senate, I think they were more well-vetted. And what happened? Where did things go sour?
Well, Bill, times have certainly changed, and these days just about anyone can mount a run and win.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And bottom line is, unfortunately, she won't quit that gig. And impeachment kind of takes too long, so it's up to voters. And come November, big changes will be in store for all those folks in the land of 10K lakes, 10,000 beautiful lakes. All right, turning our sights now to a breaking development concerning the incoming mayor of our nation's largest town, New York City's Zohran Mamdani, now announcing that on New Year's Day, he'll be sworn into office by his fellow socialist, Bernie Sanders, the fine senator. Team Mamdani says the public swearing-in ceremony with the 84-year-old elder statesman is going to take place early in the afternoon as part of a massive block party near the steps of City Hall. According to reports, nearly 50,000 people are expected to show up to watch Sanders pass the torch to his young socialist protege. However, for all intents and purposes, their meeting will be largely symbolic because, in reality, the 34-year-old Mamdani will already have been officially mayor for more than a dozen hours. His genuine swearing-in ceremony actually set to take place just after the stroke of midnight. That's when he's going to take his oath of office from the state's attorney general at an exclusive private event. The little folks like you and I, we're not invited, not on that list. In the meantime, Mamdani is now urging as many New Yorkers as possible to show up for the big event and join the celebration, which he promises will finally usher in a grand new era for the entire Big Apple. Final thought, the news roundup lowdown goes like this. It pains me to say it, but congratulations to Zohran. In just over a week, Comrade Mamdani, he'll be sworn in by a tired, angry old man and fellow comrade Bernie Good Times Sanders. No relation to the chicken guy, I don't think. Colonel Sanders. Also taking part in the swearing-in ceremony is State Attorney General Letitia James. And if her name sounds mildly familiar, vaguely familiar, it might be due to the fact that she was a defendant in a federal criminal case earlier this year. And that was the one dealing with alleged mortgage fraud. But I refuse to bring that up right now on account of, it just doesn't feel appropriate. Davey, would it be inappropriate?
Yes, Bill, it would be inappropriate.
It would be inappropriate. All right, we hope all New Yorkers welcome the new mayor with open arms just like this, as well as with an open checkbook, because this cat bought an election that he simply won't be able to pay for, and the city, in my mind, is in for a huge surprise. And by the way, they chose Bernie Sanders to do the swearing in because Karl Marx wasn't available. However, maybe, just maybe, they'll be handing out Marx's little pamphlet to the thousands and thousands of adoring Mamdani fans. And I always forget the name of that little readable. Producer Davey, little help?
Bill, are you talking about the Communist Manifesto?
That's the one, the Communist Manifesto. I always like that one, although there's not enough pictures. All right, Producer Davey, you are the News Roundup East Coast representative in charge, so I got to know, will you be attending the big ceremony?
Well, Bill, unfortunately, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to make that one.
Yeah, it'd be too cold anyway. It's not going to happen overnight, but look, when the Big Z's house of cards come a-tumbling down, and they will, New Yorkers will remember that we gave them fair warning. You chose poorly, and the consequences, they're going to be mighty unpleasant. You had plenty of good choices, but you chose that one or that one. Changing things up a bit now and pivoting to a shocking story concerning U.S. nuclear facilities, national security, and the rising threat to our country posed by Chinese-made drones. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill now sounding the alarm and demanding answers from a number of government contractors who've allegedly been using banned drones from China to help them build several highly sensitive U.S. military facilities. Now, the senators, both, by the way, are Democrats. They point out that the government clearly considers the specific drones they're using to be a significant threat to our national security, and that, as a result, federal contractors are totally prohibited from using them. Something has gone terribly wrong. They go on to say that despite the fact the companies in question are all relying on those particular devices for a variety of critical construction purposes, potentially relaying a bunch of sensitive, strategic, and classified information directly to the Chinese Communist Party. We can't have that. Now, the projects which are using the banned drones are part of their construction efforts, include military bases, also ports, nuclear weapons facilities, and a bunch more. Now, as a result of that potential threat to our national security, the lawmakers are now asking all of the companies involved to turn over all pertinent information, including a list of all their Chinese-made drones, what they've been used for, their relationship with the drone maker, and whatever else they can drum up. Now, some additional headlines we're also keeping a very close watch on here in our News Roundup newsroom. And first, a new poll showing that Kamala Harris is still the one to beat for the Democratic presidential nomination coming up in 2028, with the former VP holding a sizable lead over California's Governor Gavin Newsom. Look at that mug. That's the guy we call Gruesome Newsom. In the meantime, on the Republican side, Vice President J.D. Vance reportedly has the inside track to succeed President Trump. And he says in either case, Democrats, no, they won't be sending in their best. Newsom and Harris, that's all you got? On the international scene, Denmark voicing extreme disapproval over President Trump's decision to appoint Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as special envoy to Greenland as he ups the ante in his bid to add the world's largest island to our country. That'd be state number 51. I kind of like that. And with Christmas right around the corner, a travel nightmare as holiday travelers overwhelm American airports, causing our pals at the FAA to delay flights nationwide in order to reduce the number of planes in the crowded skies over the U.S. us. And now a quick gander at a bit of rock and roll showbiz news. And today we kick things off with a shocking medical announcement from one of our favorite pop stars of all time. Yeah, Copacabana singer Barry Manilow says that he's now battling lung cancer after doctors discovered a small tumor on his left lung. Now, fortunately, the 82-year-old crooner says the spot was found early, that he's heading for surgery to have it removed, and that even though he has to push back a few shows, drink chicken soup for a little while, and catch up on reruns of I Love Lucy, he'll be back in front of that mic in no time at all. Now, Barry Manilow, he's a great American treasure. I've been a fan of Low for decades and decades, and I only found out recently that years back he was a heavy smoker. I didn't know that. Surgery, so you know it's going to be a major success. He'll dominate the stage once again in 2026. And a couple of things. First off, what's your favorite Barry Manilow song? You can leave a comment right here. And the big roundup is a no smoking zone. That goes for you, for Barry Manilow, and for everybody else. No smoking, no vaping, no chewing tobacco either. Now, producer Davey has his candy cigarettes. They look just like this, so that much I'll let fly. But after that, nothing else. Moving along, new book about Johnny Carson, the king of late night, claims that the legendary talk show host had a long list of people which he permanently banned from The Tonight Show, and among them, Jay Leno, who turned out to be his successor, you'll recall. Also, William Shatner, Jerry Lewis, and a whole bunch more. Now, a couple of major takeaways from that, and right off the bat, I never knew that Carson had an actual list of people who he had banned from the big program, and he never really struck me as a vindictive guy. And so, you know, I was being sarcastic when I said that. Also, we're curious as to who your favorite Tonight Show host has been over the years, and you can leave us a comment right here. If you would, please. Would it be Steve Allen, maybe Jack Parr? In later years, of course, Mr. Carson, Leno, Conan O'Brien was at the helm for about 15 minutes, Jay Leno again, or maybe Jimmy Fallon. Now, producer Davey, I know you keep closer track of these things than I do, but did I ever host The Tonight Show, or did I just bypass that and go right to the very top? News Roundup host.
No, Bill, you passed by The Tonight Show and went straight to the top.
Never hosted the program. Well, we'll try to work something out. Maybe next season I pop in for a week or two of fill-in for Fallon. And sticking with TV, a number of viewers apparently up in arms about the performance of the musical guest of the most recent episode of Saturday Night Live, SNL. They claim that for her first musical appearance on the program in nearly 4 decades, 79-year-old Cher simply put on a blonde wig, held up a mic, and did the worst job of lip syncing they've ever seen in their entire lives. You know, at the end of the day or at the end of the night, doesn't matter if Cher sings live, lip syncs, or even uses a stunt double to fill in for her. It's Cher. She's royalty. She gets a pass. And if you actually watch the show, you were lucky she even showed up. By the way, in case you're not up to speed on Cher, once upon a time, she was married to a rock star named Greg Allman, and prior to that, she was married to the better half of Sonny and Cher. But I forgot who that was. I forgot his name. Producer Davey?
Bill, that's Sonny Bono.
Oh, that's it, as in Sonny and Cher. I get it now. And now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the Big News Roundup. So have an awesome day today. Stay safe. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit that little subscribe button right there. With that, we're going to dim the lights, fade to black, and we'll see you right back here on Tuesday for a brand new edition of the News Roundup.